The Dra's empire had conquered 17 systems before they encountered humanity. Their strategy never varied. Target educational facilities first, eliminate the young and their teachers, and break the spirit of a species before claiming their resources. It had worked flawlessly until now. Commander Krell stood on the bridge of the Devastator, his primary assault vessel, studying the blue-green planet below. Earth. Such an unassuming name for what intelligence suggested was a surprisingly resilient world. Sir, scouts report the human educational facility is isolated enough for our purposes. Security appears minimal, reported Lieutenant Morg, Krell's second-in-command. Krell's mouth tentacles twitched with anticipation. Excellent. The Supreme Leader expects results. These humans have rejected our initial diplomatic overtures. Now they'll learn the cost of defiance. What the Dras didn't understand was that humans had evolved as protective pack animals with a particular ferocity when it came to their young. This wasn't documented in any of the preliminary reports. A rather significant oversight. On Earth, in the small town of Riverdale, Principal Jack Thompson was having a perfectly ordinary Tuesday. 20 years in the Marines before becoming an educator had given him a certain pragmatic approach to school administration. The former Force Recon veteran had implemented security protocols that most considered excessive. Today would prove they weren't excessive enough. "Mr. Thompson, the astronomy club detected something strange last night," said Tom, the science teacher and another veteran. He placed a tablet on the principal's desk showing unusual readings. Multiple objects entering orbit, then disappearing from tracking. Thompson frowned. The government alert system had been quiet, but his instincts, the same ones that had kept him alive through 3 wars, were screaming. "Call Bill," he said, referring to the retired Army Ranger who worked as head of maintenance. "Tell him we're implementing Protocol Crimson. Now." Protocol Crimson was the highest security measure, designed for scenarios so unlikely Thompson had never expected to activate it. Within minutes, silent alerts reached the phones of the 17 staff members with military or law enforcement backgrounds. The first alien scout ship appeared over the football field at 1:22 p.m. Its sleek, metallic hull reflected the afternoon sun as it hovered silently. Students pressed against classroom windows, phones recording what would soon become humanity's first documented contact with hostile extraterrestrials. Krell watched through the scout ship's feed. "Perfect. Begin the demonstration. Low-yield weapons only. We need survivors to spread the message of their helplessness." Inside the school, Thompson was already moving. "Get the students to the shelter areas," he commanded over the staff communication system. This is not a drill. The Dras had expected panic. They expected screaming, fleeing targets. Instead, they encountered an organized response. When the first energy pulse hit the administrative wing, the building was already empty. "Sir, the humans are not responding as expected," reported the scout ship pilot. "They appear to have some sort of evacuation protocol." Krell's tentacles thrashed in irritation. "Irrelevant. Deploy ground forces. 20 soldiers should be sufficient for a building of this size." The sleek transport pod disgorged armored Dras soldiers onto the school lawn. Each stood 7 feet tall, armed with energy weapons advanced beyond Earth technology. They moved with military precision toward the main entrance. They never made it inside. The first shot came from the roof, where Coach Miller, former Marine sniper, had taken position. The high-powered rifle round found a gap in the lead alien's armor around its neck joint. The alien collapsed, leaking purple fluid onto the manicured grass. "Sir," Morg's voice held an unfamiliar note of alarm. "The humans are armed and appear to have tactical training." Krell stared in disbelief at the feed. These were educators? Where was the soft surrender he had encountered on 17 other worlds? What Krell didn't know was that humanity's long, violent history had created a species uniquely prepared for this moment, and they had just made the worst possible first impression. The Dras soldiers regrouped, taking cover behind their transport pod. This wasn't part of the plan. Educational facilities were supposed to be soft targets, places of learning, not resistance. "Spread out and flank the building," ordered the squad leader. "Use suppression fire on any defensive positions." Inside Riverdale High's Emergency Command Center, formerly a storage room adjacent to the cafeteria, Principal Thompson coordinated his staff through secure communication devices. "Lisa, status report?" Thompson asked the former Army intelligence officer who now taught mathematics. 20 hostiles outside, at least 2 casualties on their side. They're regrouping for a coordinated assault, Lisa reported, monitoring the school's security feed. They have energy weapons, but their armor appears vulnerable at joint connections. Thompson nodded grimly. "Bill, are the barricades in place?" "All access points secured except the gym entrance." "We're keeping that as our controlled point of engagement," Bill replied, his voice steady despite the extraordinary circumstances. Thompson had transformed the school's emergency protocols years ago, installing reinforced doors, bulletproof glass, and hidden caches of weapons that would have cost him his job had the school board discovered them. His paranoia had seemed excessive until today. The Draws launched their assault from 3 directions simultaneously. Energy weapons scorched the brick exterior of the building as they advanced, expecting to overwhelm any resistance with superior technology. They weren't prepared for the improvised explosive device that detonated beneath the eastern squad. The explosion sent 3 soldiers flying, their armor cracked and bodies limp. Bill had repurposed materials from the chemistry lab with devastating efficiency. "Sir, we've lost contact with Team 3, reported a Draz soldier to the increasingly agitated squad leader. In orbit, Commander Krell watched in disbelief as his elite soldiers were systematically engaged by what should have been helpless educators. "This is impossible," he hissed. "Scan the facility again. There must be military personnel present." "Sir, scans confirm these are civilian educators," Lieutenant Morg replied. "However, our intelligence appears incomplete. Multiple humans show physical markers consistent with military training." Krell's species had evolved past the need for direct combat millennia ago. The Draz conquered through overwhelming technological superiority and psychological warfare. They had never encountered a species where military training was so deeply embedded in civilian populations. Inside the school gym, physical education teacher and former Navy SEAL Ray Martin had organized the older students into an evacuation support team, moving younger children through the underground passage that connected to the storm drainage system. The passage, officially constructed as flood control, had been Thompson's insisted modification during the school's renovation 3 years prior. "Keep them moving, quiet and calm," Ray instructed student leaders. 4 blocks down, the pastor at First Church is waiting with buses. Meanwhile, the school nurse, Kate, who had served as a combat medic in Afghanistan, had set up a triage area in the basement science lab, treating 3 students for minor injuries sustained during the initial evacuation. Outside, the remaining Draz soldiers regrouped again, puzzled by the organized resistance. "We need to adjust tactics," the squad leader communicated to Krell. "Request permission to use lethal force protocols." "Granted," Krell replied coldly. "This resistance ends now." What neither understood was that humanity's educational system, especially in rural areas like Riverdale, often employed veterans seeking second careers. People who had seen combat, who carried the muscle memory of war, and who would defend their students with the same ferocity they had once defended their fellow soldiers. As the aliens prepared their next assault, Thompson gathered his core team. "They're escalating. We need to get the remaining students out and take the fight to them." Tom, the science teacher, held up a modified fire extinguisher. "I've repurposed some equipment. These should disrupt their communications temporarily." Thompson nodded. "On my signal, we implement Omega Protocol." Omega Protocol was something Thompson had never expected to activate. An offensive strategy against an overwhelming force. But as the aliens prepared to slaughter children under his protection, the former Marine made his decision. The Draz Empire was about to learn why humanity had survived its own violent history, and why targeting a human school was the worst possible. First contact strategy. The Draz assault team advanced with new determination, energy weapons now set to lethal intensity. Their technology should have made this an effortless conquest. On 17 other worlds it had. "All units converge on the main structure," ordered the squad leader. "Maximum dispersal pattern, no survivors necessary." The remaining 12 Draz soldiers moved with practiced precision across the school grounds. But something was wrong. Their tactical communications were degrading, filled with static and drop signals. Inside the chemistry lab, Tom grinned as he monitored the effect of his improvised jammers. He'd repurposed several microwave magnetrons combined with salt solutions and the school's ham radio equipment to create localized interference. "Their comms are compromised," he reported to Thompson. "We've got maybe 10 minutes before they adapt." Thompson nodded. "Execute Phase 2. Throughout the school, the remaining staff members moved with grim purpose. History teacher Mark, a former Army Ranger, led 3 colleagues through the maintenance tunnels beneath the school. Each carried improvised weapons, chemistry lab materials, shop tools modified for combat, and the hunting rifles that Bill had stored in a hidden compartment beneath the boiler room floor. The Draz soldiers entered the school through breaches they'd created in the exterior walls. They expected to find cowering humans. Instead, they found empty hallways with strategically placed mirrors that fragmented their thermal imaging. "Primitive deception," scoffed one soldier, adjusting his sensors. The adjustment came too late, as Mark's team attacked from behind, targeting the vulnerable joint sections of the alien armor that Lisa had identified. 2 Draz soldiers fell immediately. The others returned fire, energy bolts scorching the hallway walls as the human defenders retreated into pre-planned positions. In orbit, Commander Krell watched with growing rage. "This is unacceptable. Deploy the secondary assault team immediately." "Sir," Morg cautioned, "our intelligence on human combat capabilities appears severely flawed. Perhaps we should reassess." "We are the Draz." Krell's tentacles whipped in fury. "We do not retreat from primitives with projectile weapons." But the Draz Empire had never encountered a species whose history was so thoroughly shaped by warfare, where even their educators possessed combat skills. They had never met humans. Inside the school cafeteria, the aliens encountered another surprise. The sprinkler system activated, but instead of water, it sprayed a mixture of cooking oil and industrial cleaner. The concoction adhered to their armor, interfering with joint movement and sensor function. "What is this substance?" demanded one soldier, trying to clear his visual sensors. The answer came in the form of art teacher Laura, who had served as a combat engineer. She stood at the far end of the cafeteria and raised what appeared to be a modified flare gun. "Chemistry 101, she said, and fired. The spark ignited the flammable mixture. 3 more Draz soldiers fell, their armor systems overloading as they tried to compensate for the sudden temperature change. Principal Thompson coordinated from the command center, using the school's security cameras, now enhanced with military-grade motion tracking software that Bill had borrowed from his Army days. "They're adapting," Thompson noted, as the remaining aliens adjusted tactics, moving more cautiously. Time for the endgame. Thompson had never expected to implement these protocols against extraterrestrials, but the principles remained the same. As any combat situation, identify enemy weaknesses, exploit technological vulnerabilities, and control the battlefield. Outside, the second Draz assault team descended from their transport, 20 more soldiers ready to overwhelm the surprising resistance. They didn't notice the school buses departing from the church 4 blocks away, carrying the evacuated students to safety. "All remaining non-combat personnel evacuate through Route Charlie," Thompson ordered through the communication system. "Combat team, prepare for final defensive positions." The Draz might have superior technology, but Thompson and his staff had something more valuable: intimate knowledge of their environment and the unwavering determination to protect their students at any cost. In the Devastator's command center, Krell received increasingly disturbing reports. 8 soldiers down, then 12. Communications compromised. The humans were not retreating but conducting an organized defense with improvised weapons and tactics that suggested military training. "Impossible," Krell muttered. "They're teachers." What the Draz commander failed to understand was that on Earth, people contained multitudes. The gentle mathematics teacher had once calculated ballistic trajectories for artillery. The kind-hearted school nurse had performed battlefield surgery under fire. The enthusiastic coach had been a sniper with confirmed kills at 1,500 meters, and every single one of them would die before letting harm come to their students. The second Draz assault team approached the school with greater caution. Having witnessed the fate of their comrades through tactical feeds, they deployed sensor drones ahead of their advance, small floating spheres that scanned for human life signs and weapons. "Multiple humans still inside the structure," reported the team leader. "Scans indicate primitive projectile weapons and improvised explosives." In the school's workshop, Bill watched the sensor drones through the windows and smiled grimly. 20 years in Special Forces had taught him to recognize reconnaissance technology, regardless of its origin. "Thompson, they're using drones for advanced scanning," he reported through his communicator. "Time to go dark." Throughout the building, the remaining defenders pulled specialized Faraday blankets over their positions, material originally procured for the computer lab to protect against electromagnetic pulses, now repurposed as tactical concealment. The Draz sensor reading suddenly showed nothing, all human signatures vanishing simultaneously. "Impossible," the team leader muttered. "Recalibrate sensors." But the defenders were already moving. Physical, education teacher Ray and 3 staff members navigated through the ceiling crawl spaces, positioning themselves above the entry points where the aliens would likely enter. Commander Krell watched from orbit with growing concern. "Why have we lost human signatures? Explain." Lieutenant Morg's tentacles twitched anxiously. "The humans appear to have countermeasures for our scanning technology. This suggests—" "I know what it suggests," Krell snapped. "These are not merely educators. Order the assault team to deploy sonic incapacitators. I want that building secured immediately." The Draz soldiers deployed devices resembling metallic spheres at entry points around the school. The technology had subdued hostile populations on numerous worlds, generating sound frequencies that disrupted neurological function in most species, causing disorientation and unconsciousness. Inside the command center, Lisa detected the energy signatures of the new devices. "Thompson, they're deploying sonic weapons. Frequency analysis suggests they'll target our nervous system." Thompson nodded calmly. "Implement acoustic protocols." Years earlier, when renovating the school's music department, Thompson had insisted on specialized sound-dampening materials throughout the building, ostensibly to prevent band practice from disturbing other classes. The actual materials installed were military-grade acoustic shielding, capable of blocking frequencies far beyond the human hearing range. When the Draz activated their sonic weapons, the devastating wave of sound they expected was instead contained and redirected by the school's architecture. "No effect reported," the confused team leader informed Commander Krell. "The humans should be incapacitated." "Move in with direct force," Krell ordered, his patience exhausted. "Full lethal authorization." The aliens breached the building at 4 points simultaneously, expecting minimal resistance. Instead, they encountered precisely positioned defenders who had used their intimate knowledge of the building to create perfect ambush points. From his hidden position in the ceiling, Ray watched the aliens pass below through a ventilation grate. They moved with military precision, but their caution was focused outward, not above. Once the last soldier passed beneath his position, Ray dropped a specially prepared package, chemicals from the pool maintenance room combined with fertilizer from the greenhouse and packed into a fire extinguisher casing. The improvised explosive detonated in a concussive blast that incapacitated 3 aliens instantly. Similar scenarios played out at other entry points. The history and social studies corridor became a killing ground, as Mark triggered hallway lights to strobe at disorienting frequencies, while music teacher Dan activated the PA system at maximum volume, blasting a cacophony that further confused the aliens' sensory systems. In the chaos, the defenders struck with brutal efficiency, targeting the now identified vulnerabilities in the alien armor. Commander Krell watched in horror as tactical feeds showed his forces being systematically eliminated by what military intelligence had classified as non-combatants. "How is this possible?" he demanded. "These are educators." "Sir," Morg replied hesitantly, "updated intelligence indicates that approximately 7.3% of human civilians have military training. In rural areas like this target, that percentage increases significantly. We may have miscalculated." "Miscalculated?" Krell's voice rose to a shriek. "We're losing an elite assault team to school teachers." What the Draz failed to understand was fundamental to human society. Those who teach often bring their full life experiences to their profession. On a planet with humanity's violent history, this meant many classrooms were led by individuals who had once served in combat roles. Inside the school gymnasium, the remaining Draz soldiers regrouped, 7 warriors from the original 40 now, desperately trying to coordinate a retreat. "Commander, requesting immediate extraction," the team leader transmitted. Human resistance exceeds all projections. Krell's career, perhaps his life, now depended on salvaging this disaster. Negative. Complete your mission. The Supreme Leader will accept nothing less than victory. The team leader looked at his remaining soldiers, then back at his tactical display showing human defenders converging on their position. "Sir," he replied, "I don't believe victory is possible." In the Devastator's command center, Commander Krell faced a decision unprecedented in Draz military history. Their conquest protocol had never failed. 17 worlds had fallen using the same approach. Target educational facilities, demonstrate overwhelming force, and watch the species' will to resist crumble. "Sir," Lieutenant Morg ventured cautiously, "perhaps we should consider a tactical withdrawal to reassess." Krell's neck tentacles contorted with rage. "Withdraw? Before primitives with projectile weapons and improvised explosives? The Supreme Leader would have my head." "Better your head than our entire force," Morg muttered, too quietly for Krell to hear. On the school grounds, the remaining Draz soldiers fortified their position in the gymnasium. Their advanced armor, designed to repel energy weapons and withstand extreme environments, had proven surprisingly vulnerable to the creative attacks of the human defenders. 6 minutes until emergency extraction protocol initiates, the team leader informed his soldiers. "Hold position and repel any approach." In the command center, Principal Thompson surveyed the situation through security feeds. Most students were safely evacuated, and the aliens were contained in a single location. Now came the difficult decision. "We've accomplished our primary objective," he told his remaining staff. "The children are safe. Anyone who wishes to use the escape tunnel should go now. What comes next will be purely offensive." No one moved. Art teacher Laura checked her improvised incendiary device. "Those things came here to kill kids. Our kids." Thompson nodded grimly. "Then we finish this. Bill, status on the gym preparation?" Bill's voice came through the communicator, tension evident despite his professional tone. "Charges set as discussed. The structural supports are rigged. On your command, the roof comes down." Thompson had never expected to use the knowledge he'd gained in urban warfare against extraterrestrials, but the principles remained the same. Control the battlefield, use the environment as a weapon, never fight fair when lives depend on victory. "All teams, converge on the gymnasium, approach points Alpha through Delta," Thompson ordered. "Suppression fire only, keep them contained, until Bill gives the signal." The remaining defenders moved through the hallways with practiced coordination. Science teacher Tom deployed his remaining chemical smoke bombs to obscure the gymnasium's windows, preventing the aliens from identifying approach vectors. Inside the gym, the Draz soldiers detected the approaching humans on their remaining functional sensors. "They're surrounding us," reported one soldier. "Exits are being cut off." The team leader assessed their deteriorating situation. 3 minutes until extraction. Hold position." What the Draz didn't realize was that their position had been chosen for them. Every defensive move, every tactical retreat, had been subtly guided by the human defenders to funnel them into this specific location. In orbit, Commander Krell reviewed the extraction plan with growing dread. "The moment our transport touches, down, deploy shield generators. Nothing gets through. Get our people out and vaporize that entire structure." Lieutenant Morg began calculating the energy requirements, then paused. "Sir, sensors are detecting unusual vibrations in the target building. The first charges detonated at the gymnasium's exterior supports. The structure shuddered as key load-bearing elements disintegrated. The aliens looked up in confusion as dust rained from the ceiling." "What's happening?" demanded the team leader. The answer came as the roof began to collapse. Bill had spent years as a demolition specialist before becoming a school maintenance supervisor. He knew precisely how to bring down a structure while minimizing collateral damage to the surrounding building. The Draz soldiers fired desperately at the collapsing ceiling, their energy weapons carving molten channels through concrete and steel, but unable to stop the cascading failure of the structure's integrity. "Emergency extraction!" screamed the team leader into his communicator. "Now!" From his position outside the school, Bill watched with grim satisfaction as the gymnasium imploded in a controlled collapse. Dust billowed outward as thousands of tons of building materials crashed down precisely where he had planned. "Gymnasium is down," he reported to Thompson. "No signals detected from alien communications. In orbit, Krell watched in disbelief as the life signs of his remaining soldiers winked out simultaneously. "Launch the rescue transport immediately," he ordered. "Sir," Morg replied, his voice unnaturally steady. "Sensors detect no survivors. Additionally, human military vessels are now approaching our position from multiple trajectories. They appear to have detected our presence." The impossible had happened. A simple mission to break humanity's will through a demonstration of force had resulted in the complete annihilation of not one but two elite Draz assault teams. Worse, their cloaking technology had somehow failed, exposing their presence to Earth's military forces. Krell stared at the tactical display, watching the approaching human vessels with a growing sense of dread. In 17 planetary conquests, the Draz had never encountered a species like this, one where even their educators possessed the knowledge and will to inflict devastating casualties. "Prepare for immediate departure," he ordered, his voice hollow. "We must inform the Supreme Leader." For the first time in the history of the Draz Empire, they would retreat without conquest, and Commander Krell knew that the report he would deliver would change the Empire's expansion plans forever. The species they had encountered was unlike any other. Humans didn't just fight. They fought with a ferocity and creativity that transformed everyday objects into weapons and ordinary people into warriors when their young were threatened. The dust from the collapsed gymnasium had barely settled when the first military helicopters appeared over Riverdale. The strange energy signatures and civilian reports of an alien craft had finally penetrated the initial disbelief of regional command centers. Principal Thompson stood in the school parking lot, coordinating with his exhausted staff as they accounted for every student and employee. Despite the extraordinary circumstances, his training had kicked in. Mission first, emotions later. "Thompson," called a voice from across the debris-strewn field. A military officer approached rapidly, flanked by soldiers in combat gear whose weapons were held ready but pointed downward, a sign of restraint rather than aggression. "Colonel Harris," Thompson replied, recognizing his former commanding officer. "Took you long enough." The colonel surveyed the devastation with professional assessment. "Got here as fast as bureaucracy would allow. Initial reports sounded like mass hysteria. Aliens attacking a high school?" He shook his head. "Until satellite confirmed an unidentified craft in low orbit." "What the hell happened here, Jack?" Thompson gestured toward the collapsed section of the building. "They targeted the school. We responded." "Responded?" The colonel looked incredulous. "My advance team reports at least 14 dead hostiles, with technology we've never seen before." "You did this with school staff?" Thompson nodded toward his gathered colleagues, the art teacher still holding her improvised flamethrower, the math teacher reviewing tactical data on her tablet, the maintenance supervisor calculating structural stability of the remaining building. "Turns out educators are pretty resourceful people," Thompson said with grim pride. "Especially ones with combat experience." In orbit, the Devastator broke from Earth's gravity well, accelerating rapidly toward the jump point that would allow them to return to Draz space. Commander Krell sat rigid in his command chair, mentally composing the report that might well end his career, or his life. "Sir," Lieutenant Morg reported, "the humans have deployed atmospheric craft to the target site. Additionally, we're detecting multiple space-capable weapons platforms activating on the planet's surface and in orbit." "Can they reach us before we achieve jump velocity?" Krell asked. Morg performed calculations. "Negative, but it's concerning how quickly they've mobilized a coordinated response." Krell's tentacles twitched with nervous energy. "The Supreme Leader must know everything. This species cannot be approached like the others." Back on Earth, Colonel Harris had established a perimeter around the school while debriefing Thompson and his staff in the remains of the cafeteria. "Let me understand this correctly," Harris said, reviewing notes on his tablet. "They attacked without warning, specifically targeting the school, and you, a group of teachers and staff, managed to eliminate an entire alien assault force?" "Science." Teacher Tom adjusted his cracked glasses. "Technically, it was 2 assault forces. They sent reinforcements after the first group failed." Harris stared at him, then looked back at Thompson. "And you had contingency plans for this?" "Not for aliens, specifically," Thompson admitted. "But for any threat to my students. After Sandy Hook, after Parkland, I decided that my school would be different. When I started hiring staff, I looked for people who could handle themselves in a crisis. You built a militia inside a public school, Harris stated flatly. I built a family that could protect its own, Thompson corrected. Every modification to this building, every protocol we developed, was designed with one purpose: to keep students safe from any threat. Harris nodded slowly, understanding the mindset of his former subordinate. The Pentagon is going to have 1,000 questions. This is first contact, Jack. Hostile first contact. Not my concern, Thompson replied. My concern is rebuilding the gym before basketball season. The colonel laughed despite himself. Same old Thompson. Always focused on the mission at hand. He sobered quickly. But this is bigger than Riverdale now. Whatever these things are, they targeted a school deliberately. Intelligence will need to understand why. In the debris of the gymnasium, military specialists in hazmat suits carefully extracted alien technology and biological samples from beneath the rubble. Each piece would be transported to secure facilities, analyzed, reverse-engineered, and ultimately used to prepare humanity for what might come next. Because something had become abundantly clear to military leadership around the world, as reports from Riverdale spread. An advanced alien species had chosen to attack a school as their first action against humanity, and humanity's response had been overwhelming and effective. In the teacher's lounge, now serving as a recovery area, Laura bandaged a cut on Mark's forehead while they watched military personnel swarm the school grounds. Do you think they'll come back? She asked quietly. Mark considered the question seriously. They might, but next time, we'll be ready. Not just us. Everyone. What neither of them could know was that aboard the retreating Devastator, Commander Krell was reaching the same conclusion. The Draws had encountered something unprecedented, a species whose protective instinct toward their young translated into ferocious, creative combat capability, even among their educator class. Lieutenant, Krell said suddenly, modify our final report to the Supreme Leader. Include my strongest recommendation. Sir? Morg looked up from his console. Recommend that humanity be classified as a Class 5 hostile species. Too dangerous for standard conquest protocols. Possibly too dangerous for conquest at all. It was the most severe classification in the Draz military codex, previously theoretical. A species so inherently dangerous that the cost of subjugation would exceed any possible benefit. As the Devastator accelerated toward its jump point, Commander Krell stared at the receding blue-green planet on his view screen. For the first time in his career, he felt something unfamiliar. Respect for an enemy. And beneath that, a cold sliver of fear. 3 months after what became known globally as the Riverdale incident, Principal Thompson stood in the newly reconstructed gymnasium, watching workers install the last section of bleachers. The military had moved with surprising efficiency to restore the school, though Thompson suspected it had more to do with studying alien technology embedded in the wreckage than genuine bureaucratic efficiency. Looks good as new, commented Bill, joining him in the center of the polished floor. Better, actually. They used the new composite materials for the support beams. Thompson nodded. Military grade, if I'm not mistaken. Funny how our renovation budget suddenly expanded. Since the incident, Riverdale High School had become both a symbol and a laboratory. The staff had been debriefed extensively, their tactics documented and analyzed by military strategists trying to understand how a group of educators had succeeded, where conventional forces might have failed. The first day of the new school term would begin tomorrow. Despite offers to transfer, every student had returned. Despite government job offers, every staff member had stayed. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, Commander Krell stood before the Supreme Council of the Draz Empire, his neck tentacles held rigidly, in the formal posture of military address. The chamber's vast dome was filled with the Empire's highest authorities, all focused intently on the disgraced commander. You recommend abandoning conquest plans for a pre-interstellar species? The Supreme Leader's voice echoed through the chamber. Based on a single failed operation? Krell maintained his composure, despite knowing his life hung by the thinnest margin. Supreme Leader, the humans display characteristics unprecedented in our conquest history. Their educational facilities, which on all other worlds were centers of passive learning, are defended by individuals with military training. Their educators possess both the knowledge and will to transform ordinary objects into effective weapons. A murmur passed through the assembled council members. Most concerning, Krell continued. Our intelligence now indicates this was not an anomaly. Approximately 7% of human educators have military experience, with higher concentrations in certain regions. They routinely conduct active shooter drills to prepare for armed attacks on their educational facilities. The Supreme Leader's primary eye stalk swiveled toward the Imperial Intelligence Director. Is this accurate? Regrettably, yes, confirmed the Intelligence Director. Further analysis shows humans are the only known species that regularly conduct combat training for scenarios involving attacks on their young. They appear to have evolved an unusually strong protective response that extends beyond biological parents to all caregivers. Back on Earth, Thompson conducted a final inspection of the school's security systems. The military had offered various technological upgrades, but he had insisted on maintaining the fundamentals that had saved them. Simple, redundant systems that his staff could operate and repair independently. Thompson called Colonel Harris, now serving as military liaison, to the school. Got a moment? They walked toward Thompson's office, passing the wall of honor that had been installed in the main hallway. Photographs of every staff member who had defended the school, alongside plaques detailing their military service before becoming educators. Pentagon finally declassified some of the analysis, Harris said once the office door closed. Thought you should know, those things the Draws, they've hit 16 other worlds before us. Always the same pattern. Target schools, break the society's will to resist, then move in. Thompson's expression darkened. 16 worlds? And we were next? Harris nodded grimly. But that's the thing, Jack. It always worked before. No other species had teachers who could fight back. No other planet had people like your staff. People who taught calculus on Tuesday and conducted demolition operations on Wednesday. In the far reaches of Draz space, the Supreme Council continued its deliberation. The military director addressed the chamber, his tentacles moving in patterns of extreme concern. Supreme Leader, our conquest protocol relies on psychological dominance. We target educational centers because they typically house a society's most vulnerable and least defended. The swift capitulation that follows minimizes our casualties and resource expenditure. He activated a holographic display showing the devastation at Riverdale High. The humans not only failed to surrender, they eliminated 40 elite soldiers using improvised weapons and tactics. If their dedicated military forces are comparably effective, conquest would require resources beyond our current capabilities. In Riverdale, students began arriving for orientation day. Parents accompanied their children, many still processing the reality that Earth was not alone in the universe, and that first contact had occurred in their small town. Thompson greeted families at the entrance, projecting confidence and normalcy, despite the subtle changes visible throughout the campus. More security personnel, reinforced windows, new protocols for emergency response. Lisa approached with a tablet displaying data from the early warning system that now ringed the town. Technology reverse-engineered from salvaged alien components. All clear, she reported. Military satellites show no unusual activity in orbit. Thompson nodded. Let's keep it that way. Across the galaxy, the Supreme Council reached its unprecedented decision. The Supreme Leader's voice resonated with final authority. The Draz Empire has prospered through strategic conquest for 10 millennia. We select targets carefully, evaluate resistance capability, and deploy appropriate force. The leader's primary eye focused on Commander Krell. Your failure was catastrophic, but your assessment appears correct. Humanity represents a conquest cost exceeding acceptable parameters. They will be classified as a Class 5 species, unsuitable for standard protocols. Krell's tentacles relaxed marginally in relief. However, the leader continued, we must understand this species further. Establish observation posts at the boundary of their solar system. Study them. Determine if there are alternative approaches to acquiring their resources. In Thompson's office, he finalized plans for the school year with his department heads. Despite everything that had occurred, their primary mission remained unchanged, to educate and protect their students. The military intelligence team believes they won't come back, Colonel Harris told Thompson as they walked the perimeter during lunch break. Their ship retreated at maximum velocity. Analysis suggests they were genuinely shocked by the resistance. Thompson watched students laughing in the courtyard, resilient in ways that still amazed him. They were expecting an easy target, something to break our spirit. Instead, they found you, Harris replied, respect evident in his tone. The brass is implementing what they're calling the Riverdale Protocol nationwide. Veterans in education are being quietly approached for specialized training programs. What neither man knew was that across the cosmos, the Draz Empire had indeed abandoned conquest plans for Earth. But not all members of the Supreme Council agreed with the decision. Science Director Nelb, whose position depended on acquiring new biological specimens and technologies, had dispatched a small, unauthorized research vessel toward Earth. Its mission: observe human educational facilities from orbit, gather intelligence, and determine if there might be opportunities for limited specimen collection. 6 months after the initial attack, the Draz research vessel Seeker achieved Earth orbit, its advanced cloaking technology rendering it invisible to conventional human detection methods. Captain Vex studied the readouts with intense interest. Focus scans on educational centers similar to the previous target. Identify facilities with lower security profiles. The ship's sensors swept across continents, cataloging thousands of schools and universities. Eventually, they focused on a small elementary school in a neighboring county to Riverdale, a newer facility with apparently minimal security. This location shows no evidence of military-grade modifications, reported the sensor officer. Minimal adult defenders. High concentration of juvenile humans. Vex's tentacles twitched with scientific excitement. Perfect. Prepare a small collection. Team, 3 operatives, stealth protocols only. We need live specimens, not a confrontation. What the Draz didn't realize was that the reverse-engineered detection grid had been quietly expanded beyond Riverdale. The moment their scan touched the elementary school, alerts triggered at multiple military installations. In his office at Riverdale High, Thompson's secure communication terminal activated. The message was brief. Possible contact, Hawkins Elementary, response team mobilizing. Thompson reached for his phone. Bill, get the team together. We have a situation. Within 20 minutes, Thompson and 5 staff members were in a military transport helicopter heading toward Hawkins Elementary. Each carried a bag of specialized equipment, tools they had hoped never to use again. Just like old times, commented Coach Ray, checking the modified weapon he'd helped design based on captured alien technology. Thompson shook his head. Better than old times. This time we know what we're facing. The military had developed countermeasures against Draz technology, but deployment would take precious time. The elementary school's safety depended on the experienced defenders from Riverdale reaching them first. In orbit, Captain Vex prepared to launch the collection pod, carrying 3 Draz scientists modified for combat operations. Unlike Commander Krell, Vex had studied the Riverdale incident extensively. His team would avoid confrontation, using stealth technology to extract samples and retreat before human defenders could organize. Remember, Vex instructed his team, minimal contact. The juvenile specimens are the priority. The collection, pod detached from the Seeker, its descent trajectory calculated to minimize detection. Captain Vex monitored from orbit, confident in his superior planning and technology. As the pod entered lower atmosphere, however, its sensors detected an approaching aircraft on intercept course. Impossible, Vex muttered. Our stealth systems should be... The sensor officer interrupted, panic evident in his voice. Captain, the aircraft, it's transmitting a signal. In our language. On all Draz communication channels, a simple message repeated. Attention Draz vessel. You are entering restricted airspace. Any approach to human educational facilities will be considered a hostile act and met with lethal force. The defenders of Riverdale await your arrival. Vex stared at the communication screen in disbelief. The humans had not only detected them, but had deciphered enough of their language to send a clear warning, and invoked the name that had become synonymous with failure in the Draz military. In the military helicopter, Thompson listened as the translation was confirmed. Think they'll get the message? He asked the intelligence officer accompanying them. If they're smart, they will, the officer replied. The translation isn't perfect, but Riverdale should mean something to them. Thompson nodded and turned to his team. Either way, we'll be ready. The Draz collection pod hovered, its mission suddenly compromised. Captain Vex faced the first significant decision of his career. continue with a now compromised mission, or retreat. Captain, the pod commander communicated, awaiting instructions. In that moment, Captain Vex remembered the classified footage he'd reviewed of the Riverdale defenders in action. How they had transformed everyday objects into weapons. How they had outmaneuvered elite Draz soldiers on their own ground. How not a single Draz had survived to report firsthand. "Abort mission," Vex ordered. "Return to the ship immediately." As the pod changed course, ascending rapidly toward the safety of orbit, Thompson watched through the helicopter's viewport. "They're retreating," confirmed the military pilot. Thompson nodded, feeling a complex mixture of relief and grim satisfaction. "Smart move. Spread the word to the rest of their empire. Earth's schools are off limits." The helicopter continued toward Hawkins Elementary, where they would implement additional security measures and train staff in the defensive protocols that had saved Riverdale. In orbit, Captain Vex prepared his report for the science director, knowing his career was likely over, but grateful to be alive to face the consequences. His final log entry was brief, but would eventually become famous in Draz military history. Humans defend their educational centers with unprecedented ferocity and resourcefulness. The last Draz who attacked a human school didn't live to tell the tale. I have no intention of becoming the next. As the Seeker broke orbit and accelerated toward deep space, humanity's reputation spread through the stars. A pre-interstellar species that had somehow defeated the mighty Draz Empire, not with superior technology or overwhelming numbers, but with the fierce determination of teachers protecting their students. The message to the cosmos was clear. You may find humans in many places throughout the galaxy in the centuries to come. You may trade with them, ally with them, even conflict with them on distant battlefields. But if you value your existence, never threaten their children. The end.